Men, it's time to rise up. You're called to lead with courage, labor with purpose, and love sacrificially like Jesus. The world needs men of action, warriors who advance, not retreat. Now is the time to stand firm in faith, be the man God has designed you to be, and make an impact for the kingdom. Are you ready to step up to the plate? Will you answer the call? This is Man Talk, the podcast promoting biblical masculinity.
Welcome into the Man Talk studio. Hope you enjoyed that brand new intro video that we have. My name is Stephen Vaughn, and I am one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined here in the studio with your other co-host, Harold Vaughn.
Well, a lot's been going on, Stephen. Boy, have we encountered sickness, norovirus, flu, COVID, all of these things. So consequently, we've been falling behind a little bit on the broadcast, but hey, we're glad to be back. And other things are going on. Stephen, bring us up to speed on some of the good things that's happening.
Yeah, so the past 16 or 17 days, as you just said, we've been a little silent on some of our waves. We put out some bonus content, but we've been a little bit slower in our social media and YouTube presence. Thanks for following along and watching our bonus content. And the past 16 to 17 days have been very busy. I became a dad, and little baby Eliana was born. She's 16 days old today, I think, and she is doing she's doing super well. She's super healthy. All is well. We had a good doctor's appointment today, but the day after she was born, I got the flu, and then I got better, and then you got norovirus, then I got norovirus. It was just crazy. But in the midst of all that, we had the men's prayer advance, and had over 700 men. I believe it's about 720 or so that were here, give or take.
A lot.
In Roanoke, Virginia. And it was an awesome time. We even had some Man Talk live recordings there. We released one last week for the bonus content to fill in, since both of us were literally sick as dogs last week, and hope you enjoyed that. But we also have some more that'll be coming here later that you're going to get to watch from that. And it's just been a really good couple of weeks mixed in with a really challenging couple of weeks. And it's been wild. Do you want to give us a little update on the prayer advance? I wasn't there. I spent the whole year planning and preparing and working for it. But then you had to take over and lead it. So do you want to give us a little update on how it went?
Well, Stephen had organized it so well, we had a hard time messing it up. It went great. We had technical problems, sound problems, PowerPoint problems. Most people couldn't tell it, but we knew what was going on. But there were people who came to Jesus for salvation during and after the prayer advance. There was a great spirit. We had so many people tell us this was absolutely the best prayer advance they've ever attended. I always think that's the case, but this time other people were saying that, and a lot of people were saying it. So a lot of good was done. Blessings came to many, many churches in the wake of that prayer advance, and we're so thankful for what the Lord did. Looking forward to the upcoming ladies' advance later on in March.
Yeah, so man, you can check that out at our website, ChristLifeMIN.org, and you can sign up your wife, daughter, mother, whoever, and that'll be great. But we also would like to thank you if you joined us at the men's prayer advance. I know some of our listeners came, and we would like to thank you for being there. And I want to have one more announcement, and then we're going to jump into today because we do need to get right into it. But I did want to let you know today is the last episode of season 1. So that means a couple of things. Number one, that means that we're going to be taking a season break here, and you need to be following us on our social media, on Facebook at Man Talk Pod, on YouTube at Man Talk Pod, Instagram and X at Man Talk Podcast. And you need to be following us so that you can keep up to date, so that you can know when season 2 will drop. We have some news, hopefully, about season 2 that'll be dropping soon. And also so that you can keep up with our bonus content. We're going to be having some bonus content. Some of it will be audio on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Other of it will be video. But make sure you're following along so you can stay up to date with us during this season break. Well, today we do want to get right into things. Today we're talking about the balancing act, how to not let life swallow us up. Life is challenging, and I feel very odd today discussing balance because my life feels super unbalanced right now because I'm a brand new dad. I feel like my life is completely turned upside down. But today we do want to talk about how can we effectively have balance in life? I think this is a good way to close this discussion on the masculine mandate and specifically on labor. And to really cap it off, in Genesis, that's where we've been really basing a lot of the masculine mandate out of. In Genesis, when God created the heavens and the earth, he worked for 6 days, he created for 6 days, but then he took the seventh day for rest. And he set in motion a theme all throughout Scripture that as Christians, but we're talking to men, as men who are Christians, men of God, we ought to have rest. We ought to have balance in our life. So we want to talk about that today. And I think a great way to open up the discussion is with this quote. It's from the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, which, by the way, I would greatly encourage you to read it. It has been a wonderful challenge to me in my life, written by John Mark Comer. And he says this: the solution to an overbusy life is not more time, it's to slow down and simplify our lives around what really matters. And that's kind of the direction we want to talk about balance today from. Is some things we don't have control over, but we do have control over some things. So how can we achieve balance in our lives? How can we slow down and really focus in on what needs to have priority?
Well, ours is a day of extremes. So we have people who go to seed on pet doctrines and pet peeves and just get out of whack, out of order. Somebody said truth out of balance is falsehood. Truth out of balance is falsehood. And Stephen, when you emphasize one truth as all the truth to the exclusion of other truth, it becomes an untruth. And I'm telling you, we're living in a day of myopia. I guess that's the right word. Just kind of monovision. We can only see one thing, strumming the same string over and over. Some people spend their entire lives and they're just all the time trying to prop up, debate, debunk, and defend their position. And we even have this people spending their whole lives going to seed on their theology or going to seed on other things, but neglecting other things. So what we're talking about here is achieving and maintaining and striving for. How about that? That'd be the better word. Striving for a balanced life.
And really, what you said is so true. Truth is a must, and we must be surrounded by truth and found our lives on truth. But truth out of order is imbalance.
Yes.
And so to be a man who has a good work ethic, that's truth. But a man who is overworked, that's truth out of balance. So we live in a culture of extremes. You're exactly right. We live in a culture that is overwhelmed, overworked, overstimulated, over everything. Our calendars
overcaffeinated.
Exactly. And our calendars look like that. If you look at your calendar, probably, if you have one, you might not even have one and you feel even more overwhelmed. But if you have a calendar, our calendars seem to just be so full of everything. And I think about it even during the time that I was a pastor for 6 years, and just how when you talk to families, their lives are so busy. And we would always talk about it as a pastoral staff of like, how can we balance things in church life so that we don't add on to things and make these people even more imbalanced than they already are. And I think that we just live in a world that is so overworked and so overextended that balance seems impossible, and balance seems impossible to grasp. And so today we really want to talk about how can we make balance attainable, and how can we strive for it. And I think today we have some things that can really help us with that, because again, we can't control it all, but we can control some things. And so I think a good way to enter into this discussion would be to talk a little bit about this idea of balancing the sacred and the secular. You and I talked about this before. Is there such a thing as the sacred and the secular? I think that I've read a lot on that, where people are like, oh, well, we need to balance the sacred and the secular. But I would actually push back a little bit towards that. And I want to see what you think. Is there a sacred and a secular, and what does that look like?
No, absolutely not. For the Christian, everything is sacred. We don't compartmentalize and divvy up the different duties of life. I think that all of life is sacred, and it all fits into this picture. Now, I believe that we have to come to grips with some human limitations. Balance is not the result of effort; it's the result of maturity. Balance is not the result of effort. To tell a new Christian, hey man, you just need to get dead center here and get in dead middle. He doesn't even know what the boundaries are. He doesn't know what the polar extremes are. He's never looked to the far to the right or to the left, and we're telling him he needs to line up dead center. It's an impossibility. And balance is not a result of human effort as much as it is a result of maturity. And time has a way of working balance into our lives, right? Time has a way of doing this. And there's a season for everything. And there's a season to rest, even like God himself rested on the seventh day. I'm glad you brought that out because some of us are so antsy and just intense, and we work all the time, think all the time. It's hard for our brains to shut off. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this or not, but I don't think it's very healthy. There is a balance. There's a time. There's a season for everything in life, and everything has its order. I think we've heard a lot of things that are not true. Like in Bible college, they used to say to the pastors, the preacher boys, duties never conflict. Duties never conflict. I don't agree with that. I mean, what are you going to do when you've got 15 crises going on at the same time and saying we have to address all of these with moderation? And I don't think that's even possible. So I think there's a lot of idealism that has been floated in the Christian world to tell us that there is some sort of a utopian, perfect matched, moderated lifestyle, when the fact of the matter is we have to go with the flow. And so balance is not the result of human effort; it's a result of maturity. And God wants to bring balance into our lives, and wants us to achieve and maintain a semblance of balance, of course.
And not everybody is the same. And I think that that's where this idea of balance comes into play, is we try to balance our life and then expect everybody else to balance their lives the same way we balance our lives. Everybody's life is different. So when it comes to balance, I think that we really have to be careful to not have specific cookie cutter ideas. You have to fit into this exact mold, and that's what balance is going to look like. I believe it's more principle based than it is rule based. And when it comes to balance, building off of what you said about effort versus maturity, and maturity being more of a fuel for balance in our lives, I think that there's a couple of principles that really connect us into having a balanced life. And I think it's the principles of priorities, and then not just priorities, but also boundaries. And this idea of priority and boundaries working together, I think, help us create a balanced life. And what that looks like is what you gave in that illustration of all these crises hitting you in the moment. How do you have a balanced life? Well, there are times where life is going to be crazy and you have to learn how to prioritize. But you also, in those crisis moments, need to have boundaries set up to where you don't overextend yourself and cause more problems in your own life. I think of a personal story that I could explain that through. When I was a young, even younger person, still young, but even more immature and more young, when I was in my 20s, I was on staff at the church that I referenced earlier, Catawba Valley Baptist. I was one of the pastors there, and I will never forget, in the 20s of my life, and I think everybody in their 20s is this way, you're trying to prove yourself, right? So you're doing everything you can. You're working like a dog, and not that you shouldn't have a good work ethic, but you go 1,000 miles a minute trying to prove yourself. And I remember we had been in a really busy season, and my wife and I were sitting one day in the car, and we had been to the grocery store, and she looked at me and she said, "You know what?" She said, "I'm with you, I'm behind you, but I just need you to know something. If you don't get some things together in your life and get some balance together here, we're not going to have a healthy marriage, and it's going to be really hard for us to have a good family because you are trying to prove yourself and it's costing you at home." And I'll never forget her telling me those words, because it really helped open my eyes to the fact of I need to have boundaries in place to protect the priorities in my life. And priorities are important, but priorities without boundaries is incomplete. And so I need to, yes, set priorities in my life. What is important to me? What, based on my faith in the Lord and his word and how the assignments that he's given me in my life and the things that he's gifted me in, what is important to me? But also, what am I doing to set up boundaries in my life to protect those priorities? And those are the principles, I think, working together that help create balance in our lives.
Speaking of priorities, there's this matter of spiritual disciplines, and these cannot be overlooked. And we have to maintain those priorities in addition to realizing our limitations. Elijah came to a point in his life where he was absolutely depleted, utterly depleted. And the Lord didn't tell him, hey, read your Bible. The angel didn't say, hey, you need to pray for 15 hours a day. No, the Lord told Elijah, the depleted prophet, to do what? To sleep and eat. So his priority was recovery. His priority was reclamation of that which he had lost. So there is a discipline of seclusion, a discipline of silence, as well as these spiritual disciplines of prayer and meditation and Bible reading. So I would say this, when you can't pray like you should, pray some anyhow. When you can't read and study like you should, well, read and study a little bit anyhow. When you can't fast and pray, well, just do what you can during that season. And you can't do everything, but you can do something. And you can't do everything at the same time. And there's a season for everything, as we've talked about. I believe the key to maintaining balance in the long run is to keep moving. Einstein said this, life is like riding a bicycle. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you've got to keep moving. So you keep pedaling. You just do the next thing. You put one step in front of the other, and don't try to run the marathon here. Just do the next thing and keep moving in a direction. And in time, this thing moderates out. We find our way. We find a rhythm for us. I appreciated what you said. Not everybody's the same. I have a pastor friend, and he told me he had found a rhythm that worked for him. His staff would come in at 8 in the morning. He would come in at 10, and he'd been there 40 years. And he said, I found a rhythm that worked for me. And I think we have to find a rhythm that works for us instead of trying to emulate the superheroes of the faith. No, we have to find our place, find our lane, stay in it, keep moving, keep walking, and practice these disciplines will help us. And again, when you can't do things perfectly, just do it imperfectly anyhow, and do something, and don't guilt yourself, beat yourself, berate yourself, condemn yourself, castigate yourself. No. There are seasons when you just need to recover and reclaim. And I think the Lord's good with all of that. He told the prophet to do what? Sleep and eat. And there's a time to do that. And then there's a time to get up and go to bat and go to work. So I think priorities and boundaries, absolutely essential.
When it comes to boundaries, it needs to be things that are protective from what steals from our priorities. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that, I don't know about you, I find myself not being good at that sometimes. And I would assume that you guys listening would find yourself in that position too. It's hard to self-analyze sometimes. And I think when it comes to balance, it's very helpful. Like my wife was able to come to me and just be really honest in that story that I told earlier. I think sometimes we really need help in this area. I think we need friends, family members who we can be honest with and who we give access to our lives to be honest with us, because boundaries are hard to set if we have a hard time analyzing. Boundaries should be something that kind of rub up against the grain sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, one of the biggest things that helped me in just finding kind of a middle ground in my life was when the church that I was at, they afforded the pastors a month-long sabbatical. And I was able to take one of those once from the church and was able to do some things. It was a time where I was able to plan out some trips to a spiritual retreat and go to a conference and do some things. But one of the weeks I spent in the woods and I spent working. I was cutting trees. I was doing things. And I'll never forget that week. I put my phone away as a boundary. And I said, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it on airplane mode. I'm going to listen to podcasts, listen to books, do these things during the week. And I'll never forget the freedom I found from implementing that boundary. I never will forget that, because the phone was something that was taking my time away from other priorities. It was kind of sucking my attention. And I'll never forget when I did that, because that boundary taught me a lesson. It taught me that a boundary should push up against the grain. And it felt weird doing it because I didn't have my phone. I'm attached to my phone all the time. I'm used to this text message. I'm used to being able to call this person. But when it comes down to it, what is the priorities in my life? Well, it's following God, loving my family, and then all these other things. Okay, well, I don't need my phone to do those two things really most of the time. And so a boundary is something that needs to push up against the grain. And as I implement these boundaries, I can truly focus in on the priorities that I need to in order to have balance. So we need to enlist other people that can be honest with us. And I think as we kind of start to come to a close here on this discussion, we need to make it practical. We've discussed kind of the idea of balance. We've discussed this general principles for balance, but how do we make it practical? How do we find balance in our lives as men? We're talking to men, I assume here, who some of you probably work 24-hour shifts. Some of you stay up all night, you work night shift, or some of you might even be in the military and you're on deployment. Everybody has a different life. And you're like, dude, I'm just struggling to keep my head above water right now. How can I find balance? So I think we have 5 really practical ways that as men, we can at least seek to work towards having balance in our lives. And the number one is this, that we would have an awareness. And this simply means that we would be aware of what's going on in our lives, that we would see the need for change.
Don't you think necessity dictates this for most of us? We don't have the wisdom or perception or understanding of our own hearts and selves enough to know. So sometimes necessity will rudely awaken us. I was in Florida one time doing a meeting, and I'd been pushing it in and out of Roanoke on flights every week, all over the place, running ragged all the time. Had 2 small children, was not spending time with my family because I couldn't, because I was gone and they weren't. I sat in a swing on a lake in Florida one morning, and that night I got out of the swing. I sat there all day long. Now look, for an adrenaline addict, this is abnormal. And I didn't know what was going on. I was able to go and speak. I couldn't sleep. I was watching Chuck Norris videos that the host had in his house, which probably wasn't a good idea either. But it went on like this for several days. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus. I couldn't sleep. I was wore out. I didn't know what was wrong. Well, I come home and find out that this is not an uncommon problem. I found out I wasn't the only one. And I went to my doctor, and he made some recommendations. So immediately we made some changes. We shortened the meetings. Instead of going all week, I called the pastor. Look, if you want me to come, I can come through Wednesday. But if not, that's okay too. But I have to make some changes. We decided, number 2, we're going to take our family together in a travel trailer, because you can't raise your children if you're not with them. So I made that thing. And then I started to take up some things I'd enjoyed before. I like to fish, and I'd quit that, and I'd quit everything because I was just all the time out there. I didn't have a healthy rhythm. And Stephen one time told me that my rhythms were not healthy. And I think he was right, because I tend to be on or off, all in or all out. And you know, Thomas Merton, he even said some good things. He said, happiness is not a matter of intensity, but a balance and order and rhythm and harmony. And I believe this self-awareness, diagnosing ourselves, hey, something is not right here. This is not normal. And then sometimes we can get perspective of family and friends and spiritual leaders to give us some guidance and to help us become aware of really what's going on.
And that really leads us to the second step. The first step is awareness and being willing to see it. And you sharing that story about you sitting down and taking a moment, that's being aware. But that leads to the second step, and that's assessment. And this is where it comes, we just not need to be aware that there's a problem. We need to sit down and review our life to see what is imbalanced. And we said already, a great way to do that is to employ a family member. If you have family, ask them. If you have kids, ask them. Hey, Do you feel that I'm giving you enough time each week between you and I, son, daughter, whoever, wife? Do you feel that our marriage is healthy right now? What is not? Run these things through. Ask a friend. These things are helpful, but we need to switch from awareness, just being aware, to assessing and seeing what is going on. And then we need to have a time of admission. This is a time of confession, repentance, a time of change in reality is what we're saying, where we are aware, we assess, but we also see that this is probably a deeper problem. A lot of the roots of imbalance many times are from unhealthy rhythms, or also, I believe sometimes they're even from idols, where we get our focus off of what is truly the priority in our life, and we get our focus on something that might be an idol in our life. And if we have idols, we need to take time to confess that and to make that right, and to turn our attention to the one true God, the one who deserves our worship.
Richard Swenson wrote a book called Margin. And the whole idea here is we need emotional margin, ministry margin, financial margin, physical margin, spiritual. We need margin. And you're going to cut more wood with a sharp axe. And what we're talking about here is trying to get to the point where we are productive, we're maximizing our capabilities. And this is a process. And again, I think the utopian view of we're going to achieve this and, live like some sort of super god or something, I don't think that's going to happen. But I do believe that we can assess, become aware, take steps, and take action. And that book on margin is a great place for people who work too much.
That's very true, because we need to take the steps to address it. And we've already mentioned this idea of others, but man, we need accountability partners. And guys, I'm talking to the choir, and I know that it's hard. I know that it's hard to sit down and share how you feel or what you're going through with somebody else. And I get it. I hate talking about how I feel or what I'm going through with other people. I get it. But in a day where as men, we are under attack constantly, we're berated by the world, and literally there's attacks on us, our families, from every angle. And, there's an enemy, and sin and Satan does not want us to follow after the Lord. We need to band together, and we are not able to stand alone as islands. It's impossible. And we live in a country that has a very self-sufficient mentality, which is very good for a lot of things, especially in work. But when it comes to the spiritual life of following the Lord, self-sufficiency is an enemy of following God. And we cannot be sufficient only on our own selves. We cannot be islands, because we will break at some point. It's just, what is our breaking point? And so, men, I would encourage you, address what's going on in your life, the imbalances, and employ accountability partners to help you walk through priorities, to help you walk through boundaries, because a lot of times other people can help us set up boundaries that we don't even know we need. And that's super important. And ultimately, we have to take action. We have to step up and be willing to employ this idea of priorities and boundaries in our lives. Yes, it's one thing to be aware. Yes, it's one thing to assess, admit, address, but we ultimately have to step up and take action. And this is where I really want to be an encouragement. And I think you do too. And we want to say this: every man's life is different. We've said it already in the episode, but we want to re-emphasize it. Every man's life is different. So start with things that are attainable in your life. Everybody's life looks different. You might not be able to control your work schedule as much as other guys. Some of you guys, you could control your work schedule. You could set up time every week to where you say, this time is untouchable and I'm spending it with my family. Well, guess what? You have more of a responsibility, and you have more of a reason to do that. And you have all the accountability in the world that you need in order to do that, because you are wasting that time if you're not giving it to your family. But some of you guys, you can't, and that's fine. But some of us, some of us aren't in control of a lot of things, but we are all in control of some things. So we need to be attainable.
Yeah, take steps. Take steps. When our children were small, we determined we were going to take one day a week as family day. One day a week was family day, and we'd do something that was fun. Sometimes it was as simple as going bowling. Other times we'd go to a state park. Sometimes we'd go to Kmart. I mean, that's tell you what it took to entertain us, not a whole lot, but we would just do something, and we had that as a priority. We would tell the churches, I traveled and spoke in churches, hey, we're not taking lunch together today. We're not coming to prayer time today. Today is family day. And that was a step. That was a small step, but a necessary step to prioritize our families. And boundaries do prevent bondage. And when we set boundaries for ourselves, that keeps us from becoming excessive in some areas and brings a balance into our life for what's really important to us. So I'd say take small steps. Maybe you can't take huge steps, but there's something that we all can do to bring a semblance of balance to our homes and our hearts.
And we were not called to be led by the lives that we've created. We were called to lead the lives that we have been given. And so we need to be employing these things because we ought not to be in bondage to a calendar or to responsibilities that don't support the priorities that God has given to us. We need to be following Him ultimately and then employing things that are helping us focus on that. And literally yesterday, I was reminded of this fact of just priorities, boundaries, but also just being attainable and taking what you can get and that you aren't in control of everything. My daughter, she was having a rough day, as many newborns do, and she was having a little fit at one point, and she was having some feeding things going on, and she was just all over the place. And I remember yesterday it was a little bit more of a day where we were just trying to catch up and get some things back in order from all the sickness and all the craziness that's been going on in our family. And I was holding her, and she fell asleep. And she has this thing where yesterday she needed me to walk around to help her fall asleep. And as I was walking around, I was like, man, I have not prayed at all, like today or probably even yesterday at that point, just because it had been so busy. And I was like, this is a great time to just spend some time praying. And so I remember she had fallen asleep and I was able to take like 10 minutes and pray. Now that sounds super like almost nothing. Like some of us, I think we have these lofty ideas of what prayer has to be or this or that. But I found in that moment of silence where she was asleep and my soul was able to be still, this is a great time to just step up and do something attainable to feed a priority. What is the priority? My relationship with God. How do I feed that? By just taking what I can get at this moment because life is crazy. And so guys, we all have the ability to take a hold of a part of our life, something small, and be able to support those priorities. So let's start Attainable, and then we can work up from there. And I hope that today has been an encouragement to all of you listening. And let us not get comfortable living an imbalanced life. Let's not continue just sludging on in the constantly overworked, overbusy, overstimulated, overplanned lives that we live. Let us find balance. And I hope that you maybe what you need is you need to read one of the books that we mentioned today and find some balance that way. Maybe it's you need to take a walk like you did that one day and sit in a swing by a pond and just pray. Maybe you need to take a day away with your wife and you need to plan, whatever it is, let's find an attainable way, men, to really employ and find our priorities, but then also employ boundaries to protect our priorities. And I hope today was an encouragement to you. Well, it's the end of season 1. I really can't believe that it's the end of season 1. We thank you for joining us this season. It's been a wild ride, and we literally have gone from no listeners to I looked the other day. We're over 3,500 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you for subscribing. That is a huge help to us. You want to know how you can help us? Subscribe, click the notification bell, and get notified and watch our content on YouTube. Remember to be following along on social media so that you can keep up with us during our break. And until season 2, we're going to sign off here, and we can't wait to see you then. So follow along, and we'll see you in season 2.